All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Patriots First and Goal. I am Alec Shane here breaking down week 1 of the preseason, week 2 of the preseason underway, and some pretty, I guess for us, major moves around Patriots Nation. Looking forward to breaking it down, but first of all, to be polite, Rich Hill, how are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to break down real football, even if it's a bunch of players that aren't actually going to make the roster. It was really fun to see them actually wearing pads, seeing them on the field, seeing new kickoff rules. So I'm excited. I feel like the hottest part of the summer is in the past, and I feel ready for fall.
Yeah, no, definitely. The weather's getting a little cooler. I'm very happy to actually have a game to break down, even if it was the worst team in the league's backups against the third worst team in the league's backups. It is still football. Before we get into it, I want to talk about real quick. I'm actually a pretty big fan of the new kickoff rule, just in general.
Yeah.
I think every kickoff for that Patriots-Panthers game was returned, which is a nice change of pace from the touchdown, scoring review, commercial, extra point, commercial, kickoff or touchback commercial that we're so used to.
Totally.
I know it's kind of weird looking, but I think it adds to the game. So I'm psyched about it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and this is even one of our downs, but it's one where I feel like anytime you can change a gimme play or a nothing play, one that, to your point, like that's where you go to the bathroom. Let's be honest here. No one's sitting around watching the kickoffs. And so whenever you're able to swap one of those, like, okay, this play doesn't have to happen, to one where, okay, maybe there's some stakes, like when they move the extra point back. Like these are great rule changes. The one where this one also adds to player safety. So like you get that double combo of, okay, cool, there's actually something that's going to happen on this play and the players are healthier. This is a win-win. So I'm excited to see where it goes this year.
I am as well. Speaking of win-win, what a great transition into first down, our first and goal. Big news, I think, out of the Patriots Nation. There was talk about Matthew Judon's contract, where he was going to be, if he was unhappy, if they were going to extend him. Those questions have all been answered. He has now been, maybe not officially, but all but officially traded to the Atlanta Falcons for a third down pick. And I didn't do a whole deep dive into this, Rich Hill, so maybe I missed something, but I have yet to see a take where the Patriots got fleeced. It was a bad move. They got hosed. I think everyone's pretty happy. I think it's kind of mutually agreeable that both sides got a win on this one. And I'm pretty happy about it from a long-term perspective, because for a team that's not going anywhere this year, they got rid of a 32-year-old pass rusher who's not part of the rebuild, and you got a pretty decent draft pick in exchange.
Yeah, totally. And it's one where the Falcons, are they like truly a contender? I don't know, but they're making moves like they could be. You know, the NFC South is continuously one of the weakest divisions in all of football. So they have a very real chance to make it. They brought in Kirk Cousins, who, even though he's coming off an injury, really helps him on the offense. They have a good group of players. I like Drake London a lot. They brought in Darnell Mooney. I like that. They have Kyle Pitts at tight end. They have some quality running backs with Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier. So like they have good players. They have the pieces if everyone's healthy. And so why not take a mid-round swing on Matthew Judon just in case Kirk Cousins comes back? Looks like the top 7 quarterback that he's been for the past 5 years. And if they're able to do that, hey, you know what? They can contend. Maybe they do a deep run or not, or two, and it'll be totally worth it. I don't think that future, or not even technically it's the future, it's the upcoming third round pick is ever going to be the deal breaker, especially when you're looking at what is the window with Kirk Cousins. They're looking for, can we win the next 2-3 years? And that's probably what Judon's extension is going to be. So good for the Falcons. Patriots, I've talked about this with my friends as well, where Judon just wasn't in the same timeline. We're looking at players that are under the age of 26 as being part of the Patriots timeline here. Anyone older is very fair trade bait, or they're okay with not contending and just being culture players. And that's fine too. Judon, he's a good culture player. Also, hey, if he wants a bigger contract, it's not going to be with the Patriots because he's not matching their timeline based off of the dollars. So win-win for everyone.
It is. I mean, it's a loss for fans. He was a fan favorite. He was really fun to watch. The red sleeves were always enjoyable to look at. He's been the best player on the team since he came here in 2021, and it's a pretty big hole that's left. But last season, he missed almost all of it due to injury. You don't know where he's going to be at 32. Like pass rushers, like running backs, they kind of hit that cliff, and they can be elite for another couple of years, or they can just really not produce anymore. It kind of sucks that he's gone, but again, what would he have contributed? They'll say he gets 10 sacks this season and they go 5-12. Like, who cares, right? It doesn't matter. It's obviously a indicative of how the coaching staff thinks. where they see this team going this year and beyond. And while they're definitely a worse team today than they were this time yesterday, I think it's for the best long term. Also for the best long term, I think, although it's kind of the opposite in terms of a great signing, JuJu Smith-Schuster is also no longer a Patriot after, I believe, just one career touchdown. I could be wrong on that stat, but I think he only has one touchdown in his very brief tenure here. And I know people are talking about what an awful signing this was, what a disaster it was. He didn't work out. You can add his name to the very, very long list of receivers who come to New England and just don't work out for whatever reason. And I know it was a bad signing kind of in the vacuum, but what makes it worse is just that you saw the season that Jacoby Myers had this year.
Yep.
He didn't break the bank. He wasn't a world beater, but he produced exactly as you'd expect him to, as he probably would have in New England. And to watch him do that as JuJu is now on his ass as a free agent, it just kind of shows that maybe the time for kind of a managerial switch was right. And I'm not exactly going to be sorry to see him go.
Oh, totally. I mean, like he was one of a pretty long line of bad signings going back to like 2018-ish. Even towards like the end of the Brady era, coming out of that Super Bowl, obviously, but like after the 2018 season, pretty long line of just like, oh, this player did not work out. Here's big money here for JuJu Smith and even Hunter Henry, who was like perfectly fine, but no way worth like that top 5 tight end money that he was paid. Just the decision makings on the offensive line, just like a long track record of moves that were not good. They had a great defense. That was fine. Every other possible move on offense pretty much went bad. Not good. Ramondre Stevenson, probably the only like good move on offense that we saw, other than, drafting Demario Douglas, which to the point of moving on from JuJu Smith-Schuster is similar for the reason of why it makes sense to move on from Matthew Judon. Who are the young players that they have in the wings? They extended Anthony Jennings on defense. Obviously, Uche is still here just for 1 year, but you have Dietrich Wise, Keon White. You have 4 players that are in the rotation. Shane Jimenez is like looking good during this preseason as well. You have some depth on that pass rushing spot where is someone coming back from injury in Judon's role going to give you that much better to make you a contender, as you said? No. Okay. The 3rd round pick's worth a little bit more. Same thing on the offensive side. Is every single wide receiver on the Patriots roster better than JuJu Smith-Schuster? Probably not. Yeah. But when you look at what is the upside that the players have, I'd rather see what they have with Kayshon Boutte than see what they have with JuJu Smith-Schuster on that. And Boutte is like the 7th receiver in the depth chart.
So if I had to ask Rich, if you had to rank all like the receiver busts over the years, be it JuJu Smith-Schuster, be it Doug Gabriel, be it Joey Galloway, Aaron Dobson, Mohamed Sanu, Chad Ochocinco, Chad Jackson, where would you rank JuJu in terms of like the disappointments, in terms of expectations versus what we delivered on the field? Yeah,
it's one where I don't even know what the actual expectations were. I was a fan of the signing when it happened, and it's one that I'll still stand by. The decision made sense. It didn't work out. That's a shame. Part of it in my head was also that the Patriots offense just never had a shot anyways. And so you combine a bad offense with a player coming off of a degrading knee injury, it's not going to turn out well. So I think, in my head is like upside was that he'd be a 900,000 yard receiver. More likely, he'd probably be in that 600, 700 yard receiver. He came well under that. So definitely a disappointment. Would he be in my top 3 most disappointing wide receivers? Probably not. First off, I will defend Chad Ochocinco to the death in the sense that he did anything and everything that was asked of him, despite not producing in that just incredible offense. But he did every single thing that the coaches asked of him and no complaints. He was a true team player. So I respect the heck out of him for that one. It was just not a good offensive fit. But Chad Jackson is easily the most disappointing one. And then Mohamed Sanu would definitely be my top 2. Just when you think of like, who in what world was Mohamed Sanu worth a second when DeAndre Hopkins was then traded for a second, like a little bit later? And it was just like, what? Who made this trade for the Patriots? It's the equivalent of trading away Shaq Mason, where like no one thought that was a good idea in the first place, and they still went ahead with it. And then you replace it with Cole Strange afterwards. And it's just like every single decision around that was just bad.
For me, I get it. I mean, Mohamed Sanu, I think his Belichick wanted him. He tried him so many times with the Bengals. He just couldn't get him. He was kind of just like out of like spite, just like stubbornness to get him. For me, over the years, I was so excited for Joey Galloway to come to New England. He could still fly at the time. He was still kind of at the tail end of his prime, but he was still like a good physical, rangy receiver. And I really thought him and Brady could do some cool stuff together. And he just could not figure out the offense. So he'll always be the biggest. I wouldn't call him a bust, but like the biggest disappointment for me in terms of expectations and reality. But yeah, I never came in thinking JuJu was like the answer. I was just like, man, I hope he's better than Jacoby Myers. And he was definitively not better than Jacoby Myers. So I think one positive subtraction and one negative subtraction. That's going to be a positive next year and beyond in Judon and JuJu. The JuJus and the Judons are gone. It's kind of the way it is. This is part of the season where this happens. You know, we're no strangers to key players getting traded, and better a year too early than a year too late, I always say. But yeah, that's kind of it around Patriots news. Let's move on to second down, Rich Hill. The Patriots and the Panthers played, I think, what can technically be classified as a game of football. Again, I really don't know how much we can take away. Jacoby Brissett played one series. Drake May played one series. The Panthers didn't start their first their third. Jack Plummer's like their third stringer, if that. There's really not a lot you can glean in terms of kind of the offensive, defensive production. But there's one thing I'm going to take away from this game. There's two things I should say I'm taking away from this game. One, a positive. One thing that really worried me in preseasons past, I think you and I talked about it on our past podcast. We're like, hey, man, did you notice how bad the Patriots were at tackling in that game? And we're like, yeah, they can't seem to tackle. And the tackling was on point in this game. You can't really teach tackling. The tackling was good, and that's something you can't really like slack off on. So I was excited to see that. Good tackling from the defense. Swarming, they were fast. That should translate into regular season. The negative, or not the negative, I guess like the head scratcher. Maybe you can answer this question, Homie Rich Hill. I'll get a second and goal here. Why in the hell did Bailey Zappi see so many minutes of a game in which they don't need footage on him? He's not auditioning for other teams. There's plenty of game tape. They've got two quarterbacks ahead of him on the depth chart. What did they get out of starting Zappi for most of that game?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's one thing, or I mean, honestly, just one thing that you got out of. First off, I will say that it was so frustrating, and I get the process, but it was so frustrating to see like Caleb Williams going out there, Jaden Daniels going out there, JJ McCarthy going, like all of these young quarterbacks going out there playing for like 2 to 3 quarters and getting 20 passes out there. And then you get Drake May who gets like 2 dump offs. It's just like, oh my gosh, come on. And it's because the reason behind for Gerard Mayo is they wanted him behind the top offensive line, which terrible sign for the offensive line if you don't trust him even for a second behind the backups. But I think the big thing, and kind of in line with moving on from JuJu Smith-Schuster, is that what is one of the biggest question marks that the Patriots have on their roster? It's who are their wide receivers? Like, obviously, you need your quarterback to be figured out, but they really need to have footage on. Look at all of these wide receivers who can do anything here, right? Like, is Boutte worth investing in? Polk, he's looked good in camp. Can he put it together when he's actually on the field? Show me what you can do. And I think to put them in the best possible chance of what does it look like for you as an NFL receiver to catch a ball from someone who has NFL experience, the only option really was Zappi. And so if the decision driving, why would you use Zappi for so much? When in my head, I also would have just put in Milton just because, see what you can do. You know what Zappi is. He is a fine, low tier backup quarterback. But if you're looking at, okay, we have no idea what we have at wide receiver, look up and down our roster. Who are the players with NFL experience in it? There's not much, unless you're going with Rieger and Thornton. And I wouldn't count Thornton really having any professional experience on the offensive side of the ball. And so give them a quarterback who started at least a few games. And that really sets up the receivers for a better footage than if they're getting someone that you have no idea if he can actually complete a pass or not.
So you don't think Rich Hill had anything to do with the fact that the field was wet and the offensive line was a mess, and someone always gets hurt every preseason, and if someone's going to go down, they can spare Bailey Zappi? Nothing malicious there?
No, I mean, not malicious, but I mean, that's probably why they're like, we don't want to put Drake May out there. He's worth too much. And so if you're going to say which quarterback gives us the best option of, we know what he can do, who gives us a high enough floor to fairly evaluate the other players, but also isn't our franchise cornerstone, you're left with Zappy.
Yeah. You're left with Zappy. That is, you know what? There are worse ways to make a living than to be the guy that they're left with. He's getting paid decent amounts for doing this. So good for him. Again, I just wish we'd gotten a little bit, maybe like fine, one drive Brissett, fine. But like, yeah, give me 2 Drake May drives. Or if you're only giving me 1 Drake May drive, how about like 3 passes? Just something rather than like just like 2, I think it's 2 checkdowns were all we got out of him. That maybe I couldn't have made the throw, but I could I'm at least in like the area if I was drunk enough, I can convince myself I can make that throw. Maybe next time against the Eagles on Thursday, we'll see more of him. But yeah, that was kind of disappointing. Joe Milton was, though, I'd say he was exactly as advertised.
Totally.
He's fun to watch. He's a big dude. He's got a cannon of an arm. He did almost, I feel like if we were to like put Joe Milton's fourth quarter and Malik Cunningham's fourth quarter last year, they'd be like almost identical in what they were able to do. Exciting, very boring game. And these guys come in the fourth quarter. They scramble around in the backfield. He had that 12-yard run where he ran for like 40 yards. There were a touchdown pass. I still don't see him making an NFL roster as an actual starter. But in terms of like a cool, sexy prospect, or maybe you can install a package with him, I'm all about it.
Oh, totally. I mean, it's one where at least you give him something exciting to look at. And like the comparison to Cunningham in my head just like only goes as far as the emotion of just like, this is exciting. This is what the preseason's all about. And I was just, it's fun to not watch Zappy out there. Sorry, man. Like in reality, it's just like fun to be like, this is the promise of something that could be exciting. And he delivered on it. That's all you're looking for. And even if he is nothing more than like a third string Ryan Mallett, somebody who, can just throw it a billion miles an hour. But I feel like Milton showed more than that. I'm not going to crown him in any way whatsoever, but he definitely played well enough that he warrants more time and attention. Not to take it away from Drake May, not to win it from Jacoby Brissett. But when you're thinking of, do we have something here? Is he a viable backup? That's important to know, right? Whenever they had, they brought back Brian Hoyer, he was kind of your threshold of like, okay, can our QB2 be better than Brian Hoyer? And if so, that's why we're going with Zappy over Hoyer, like that kind of a thing. And it's in a similar situation of if Joe Milton ever looks better than Jacoby Brissett's probably gone just because Drake May's the future and you don't need to really have 3 quarterbacks on the roster. Nope. And so he's worth seeing what you can do with him.
To the end, Chill, if you had to guess right now, you reserve the right to change your mind at a later date.
Nope.
Would you put Milton on the final, not practice squad? Does he make the actual roster? If you had to guess right now.
If I had to guess right now, I would say yes. He would be like the 53rd man on the roster. But I don't see them keeping Zappy around. I see Zappy honestly moving on in some capacity in the coming week or two, just because he's going to land somewhere else. And I don't see him getting trade value, but I do see him being a viable backup somewhere. And obviously the Patriots aren't flush at the quarterback spot, but he's not someone that they need to invest in at this point. And so teams need to have 3 quarterbacks. I think Milton is exciting and interesting enough of a player. Obviously, like teams could have had him if they wanted him. But if he puts enough tape together, I don't think that they'd be able to sneak him onto a practice squad, especially as injuries mount during the preseason.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think this time last week he was on the outside looking in, and I think he's a bubble guy now. I think he's kind of climbing his way up. The only real negative on him is he's not a special teamer, so it's a pure quarterback. That's kind of tougher to do. But he did everything he could do with the reps he was given. Speaking of the reps you were given and special teams guys, who had David Wallace on their bingo card as the preseason darling that everyone's talking about today? He's like the 9th receiver in a very crowded, very weak receiving room. Probably the only real offensive spark besides the Joe Milton stuff was the punt returns he had.
Yep.
They had a couple guys out there doing punt and kick returns. He's the only one that delivered. I wouldn't say he's like locked in as a new punt returner now, but I think he's also like a guaranteed cut day candidate to now like, maybe he's going to hang around and be like the 52nd guy on the roster if Milton's 53.
Yeah, especially if you're like, which is the undrafted player that's going to make the team? I don't know. As you said, the kick return game is different now. And he, had a 24-yard kick return. He averaged 18 yards on his 2 punt returns. He had some wiggle and shake out there. So I could see him being a special teams player that you keep around, because remember, Patriots for like the past 2 years had the worst special teams units of Bill Belichick's entire career. And those performances matter. They need to get better on special teams. And just as barren as it's felt that their offense has been, so too is their special teams unit. And so anytime that there's a special teams player that stands out for like in a good way, you have to start thinking, okay, is this someone who then does have a role on the team?
You never know. Again, I think he did everything he could at every single point. Punt returns are always fun to watch. There's no reason not to try him out for a couple more times. And selfishly, as somebody who's both a writer of fan notes every week and a big fan of that show, The Office, he shares a name with David Wallace, CEO of Dunder Mifflin. So I can make a lot of references there that no one else is going to get besides me. There's always one great name guy, like Michael or Bill, like Bill Murray. Remember Bill Murray? He was great. So maybe we can get a David Wallace on the Patriots so we can make some Office references. But other than those two guys, I guess I should probably pat myself on the back a little bit before we move on to the Philadelphia Eagles and beyond. I thought my guy Terrell Jennings had a pretty good game. He was the leading rusher. I mean, it's 38 yards on 6 carries. That's still like 6 yards a carry. He showed himself a capable receiver. He caught both passes thrown his way for 11 or 12 yards. But, I don't know if he kind of bumped Kevin Harris out of the RB3 spot, but he made a case for himself, and I can't wait to watch him on Thursday.
Totally. And it's going to be like a very real battle, because Patriots typically carry 4 running backs. So outside of Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson, there's probably 2 spots available. And who has done the best? Like, Kevin Harris has not done himself any real favors on it. And then we look at who also contributes on special teams. JaMychal Hasty played 17 snaps on special teams. So second most on the entire roster. So he's finding his path via the special teams unit. And he has a very real path there. Does Kevin Harris, did he play well enough in your mind to say, okay, I would take Harris, knowing what we've seen from him, over a player like Jennings?
No, absolutely not. And did Harris play badly? No, but is there like any play that he had a touchdown on like a 1-yard run, but like that wasn't anywhere where he really stood out. And I feel like as the running back position continues to get devalued, and you don't need to spend a 2nd, 3rd, 4th, even 5th round draft pick on a running back anymore, guys like Jennings can really make an impact, and he can just be like a hard runner that you spell Ramondre Stevenson with. I think in terms of the versatility he showed, at least I'm not going to say he's this like 3rd down pass catching back extraordinaire yet, but if I had to pick one of the 2 right now and the other one had to go, I'd probably still lean towards Harris because he's got more actual NFL experience, but it wouldn't be like a gimme no-brainer decision, and it's all you can ask for at this point in the preseason.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, there's a few other positions that I feel like have stood out in that way. Again, first preseason game. So it's exciting to actually be able to have these conversations. But outside of Jennings, I feel like there were a couple other players that stood out in a like, oh, maybe there's something here. And I'm excited to see what they become. But Giles Harris is someone who stood out to me. He played a lot on special teams, but also had 2 passes defended. And then Jeremiah Farms on the defensive line. They have a very real need with Christian Barmore not being available this year. He had a sack out there, and he's, I think it was Drod Mayo. He's like, Farms does everything at practice. He pretends to be like a fullback. He does scout team stuff. He has also a very real good story arc to make this team, and there's a clear need for him.
Yeah, I mean, Jeremiah, one of those guys, like, my favorite game of who the hell is that guy? You haven't heard a lot from him this offseason, this preseason, but yeah, he's coming there. And good news is Christian Barmore is actually spotted at practice this week. We'll talk about on 3rd down and beyond, but maybe he comes back. I still don't personally see him coming back at all this season. I don't know why they'd rush him back. And now with Judon and Barmore likely out, it's good to see guys like that stepping up when they can. Again, it was against the worst team in the league's backups, but we'll hopefully know more, because I imagine, at least I'm like the hope, Rich, that the starters see more than a drive or 2 against the Eagles coming up on Thursday. So we'll probably know a lot more this time next week, or as much as we can know, given the preseason kind of uncertainty. But look, I think everybody that I wanted to see play well played well. The guy, and again, the thing you really probably take the most out when it comes to preseason is who didn't play that much. That's really the most you can really glean, is like who didn't see the field. Jacoby's locked in, May's locked in. I think Christian Gonzalez played one series. All the guys you didn't expect to play didn't play. And so it's really all about rounding at the back end of the roster. And the back end of the roster guys, I think they made it very, very interesting. And cut down day is going to be really, really fun, for lack of a better term. Not for them, but for us.
Yep, totally. And like someone actually did a really cool chart of like who are the people who didn't play past the first quarter. Because obviously, as you've mentioned, the players that didn't play are pretty solid roster locks. You're talking about the Demario Douglas, Jabril Peppers, Bentley, Mapu. Some people dealing with injuries, but you have the two Jones defensive backs, and then Hunter Henry, and then Godshaw. So you have a bunch of players that you're like, okay, I know you're gonna make the roster if you're healthy, kind of a thing. But then you look at the people who suited up and played that didn't go past the first quarter. Brissett and May didn't make it past the first quarter. Stevenson and Gibson at running back didn't make it past the first quarter. Osborne played one drive at wide receiver. He was out at like the 12-minute mark. He played probably for, I think it was like 40 seconds in the entire game. And then Tyquan Thornton didn't make it past the first quarter, which is interesting, but neither did Smith-Schuster or Jalen Rieger. So it's very clear decision in my mind that they wanted to go with who do we have at the younger levels, not because I think Thornton is a lot, because obviously neither was Smith-Schuster or Rieger, but I think it was a decision to bench some of the veterans after the first quarter. And then at the tight end spot, Austin Hooper sat after the first. So very clear idea of who is more likely to make the roster or not. But I'm excited after the break to break down the Patriots in their upcoming game against the Eagles. And so we'll take a moment. We'll be right back after this.
Hey everyone, it's Alex Shane from Patriots First and Goal, here to tell you about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It's also the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports, because unlike other apps, with Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. You just gotta pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, then watch the winnings roll in. Plus, with Prize Picks, if you sign up today, you can get $50 instantly when you play just $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. I've always been a big stats guy, so for me, it's all about more or less on stat projections on certain players. I love Patrick Mahomes to throw for more than 400 to 300 yards this season, and for Aaron Rodgers to throw for less than 3,750. I will always go for Tyreek Hill more than 1,000 receiving yards, and Saquon Barkley for less than 1,000 rushing yards. It's easy to do, and it's a ton of fun. Just download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS, and you'll get a first-round deposit match of up to $100. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks. Run your game.
All right, we are back here to break down third down, Patriots preseason game against the Eagles. Alec, have you been following how camp's been going between the Patriots and the Eagles? Because they've been doing joint practices this week.
They have been doing joint practices this week. And the first thing I always look for when it comes to these things is how many fights have broken out. And it looks like no fights have broken out, which is a little disappointing. I'm not going to lie.
Didn't Uche?
You like to see the passion. You like to see guys scrap it up a little bit. But it seems that these are two teams that have a lot of respect for each other. Jalen Hurts was very complimentary of the Patriots defense. He still remembers barely beating the Patriots. It's crazy to think how the Eagles barely beat the Patriots in week 1 of last season, primarily because the defense stymied that offense. So we're seeing a lot of first teamers on first teamers. The guy that's really standing out to most of me, which is making me very happy, is Christian Gonzalez.
Yes.
Just locking down one of, I'd argue, the better receivers in the league in A.J. Brown. It's been a great battle to watch, and Gonzalez has kind of come out on top of that most of the time. So I'm looking forward to those two battling out a little bit more on Thursday. But so far, I've loved these joint practices. I think it's really good for both teams. It kind of ups the intensity a bit to get the competition, get the competitive juices flowing. But I don't know if anything you took away from it, but mainly it seems the defense is still, despite Matthew Judon being gone, is as advertised.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's been good to see the Patriots defense standing out. I think a lot of the negative sides of it has been as expected, that the Patriots offensive line looks bad. It is not good. They are getting destroyed by the Eagles, who have a very good defensive front, but the Patriots are comical out there. But beyond that, it's been nice to see how competitive some of the players have been. There's good reports coming out about Drake May having strung together some good practices in a row. Obviously, it kind of falls apart at the end when they get into some of the sessions and the offensive line just can't do anything. Someone put out a post on Pat's Pulpit around how, Drake May is being hamstrung by the second string offensive line. And it's true. He's getting backup snaps because Brissett's playing with the starters. But the starting offensive line is already kind of a problem. So when you get to your second string and you get a bunch of players who probably shouldn't be on an NFL roster, it's going to be bad, even if there is potential in some of them. And so for me, what I'm looking forward to / what is the most important thing that we need to learn coming out of this game is, can the Patriots find an offensive line? That was the biggest problem that they had last year. We said this all offseason before they went into it, that sure, Mac Jones can be what he can be, but if this offensive line doesn't figure itself out, the season's over before the 4th week. And it's what happened. And so we cannot be in a situation this year where the Patriots are still trying to figure out who is their best right tackle when you enter into week 1. They need to figure out who their top unit is and get them a lot of reps together. They need to familiarize themselves with each other, because if they don't do that, if they go back to the rotating offensive line, it's just going to be really bad for everyone.
So let me ask you this: how much are you going to take away from the starting 5 that comes out on Thursday night against the Eagles? Are you going to think like this is probably what we're going to see in September?
Yeah, definitely. I think whoever you see as the starters on this one is going to be who gets most of the time. I think it's a situation where the Patriots need to settle in. I think they have a general idea of what they want to do. I'm personally not thrilled with the idea of Onwenu going back to the interior. I feel like they have not enough depth at tackle to allow for that to happen. Obviously, like, you want Caden Wallace to develop, and then you have Chucks, who can be the other offensive tackle. But in reality, I feel like there's just enough players that are serviceable on the interior, and getting serviceable interior linemen is a lot easier than getting very good offensive tackles. And so if I'm the Patriots, I want to put Onwenu back at right tackle. I really want to do that. Have him be next to City Sow and then David Andrews, and your right side is going to be good. It's not going to be just passing. It's going to be good. And then obviously you have question marks at that left tackle spot, but then it's going between Chucks and Caden Wallace, which is much better than being like, is it going to be Calvin Anderson or Vidarian Lowe? Like, it's going to make that a better conversation. And obviously Cole Strange has come back from an injury, so he's not really in consideration. But then if you're like, we are trying to figure out who our left guard is, as opposed to being like, we don't know who our tackles are, I'd much rather have them try and figure out who their left guard is, and then trust that your center and your left tackle will help be able to support them, whether it's like Leverett or Jordan's been getting some snaps out there. Layden Robinson was obviously drafted with this in mind. They have bodies that can do that. Whereas the best case scenario for an offensive tackle, if it's not Wallace or Chucks, is going to be someone that we saw last year just be the absolute worst tackle of the past decade.
Tell you, I agree with everything you just said, but let me also just say, I do think Vidarian Lowe catches way more flack than he deserves. I feel like Vidarian Lowe is like the name everyone goes to and talking about how crappy the Patriots are. It's like they have Vidarian Lowe at left tackle. He's not a good left tackle, but is he like the worst tackle in the league? I would not call him the worst left tackle in the league. I think Vidarian Lowe gets more crap than he deserves, personally. That said, I don't want to see him out there at any point. I think a lot of it's going to depend on, like we saw, like our question of how often how much Bailey Zappi played in the first week. Maybe it'll be indicative if the offensive line and Drake May sees extended amount of time. They're really more confident in this unit with him. Maybe that could kind of be 1/2 of done, 1/6 of the other kind of situation, where how much the quarterback plays is directly tied to how much the offensive line plays and how they do together. It's tricky though too, man, because I also feel like you really want to. They're also kind of thin at the offensive line. If one guy goes, like, who's their backup center right now?
It's Nick Leverett,
who's hurt. And so, like, I think you also want to see, like, well, if one of these guys go down, who's going in behind them. So it's a tough kind of balancing act of let's get our starters established, but let's also see what we have in the tank if we need to have somebody in the tank. So maybe the starting offensive line gets the full first half. I don't know, with only 3 weeks in the preseason now. Like, is this like the new week 3 of the preseason where all the starters go like into the third quarter, or is that still kind of week 3 of the preseason?
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's a good question. I'm trying to look up the playing time from last year in week 2, and it's James Ferentz led the team with 81% of the snaps on offense. And it looks like the starters, like you look at JuJu Smith-Schuster, Kendrick Bourne, Parker, throwing out some names. My goodness, that was a bad year. And Mac Jones, they played 18 or fewer snaps, so less than 30%. So they were playing the first quarter and maybe a little bit into the second, but that was it. And I would expect something similar where maybe you give Jacoby Brissett the whole first quarter, but then maybe you give Drake May the second and the third. And then you give Joel Milton the fourth. Please don't give it to Bailey Zappi. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it went something like that. And in particular, it is a different year for the Patriots because they have so many young players. There's not a lot of incumbents on offense that you can be like, other than Hunter Henry and Ramondre Stevenson, maybe Demario Douglas, you're a true, like, we don't need to see anything more from you, right? Like, even Jacoby Brissett, who's a veteran, you still want to see something from him because he's new to the roster and it's a new offense. And so I feel like this is a situation where I wouldn't be surprised if some of the younger players who could get some playing time in the regular season play a fair bit of this game.
To the end, Rachel, is there anybody you were maybe had an eye on last week against the Panthers that you want to keep the eye on, or are you shifting your eye on anybody new in particular? Like for me, I'd love to see Keyshawn Boutte have continued, or Booty. I don't know how you pronounce his last name. Nobody does. I like to see him continue to develop. I think he had a pretty good game against the Panthers. Maybe we can see more from him. Anybody in particular you want to see step up a little bit?
Yeah, honestly. Yeah, I'm excited to see some of the younger receivers, right? That's always the case. I want Polk. Obviously he caught all 3 of his targets last game for 14 yards, so not a barn burner, but he's done very well in one-on-ones so far this week against the Eagles. I'm interested to see what he could look like if he gets more time with the starting quarterbacks. He seems like he's doing well in general, but also, yeah. Is Boutte going to be able to build off of what he had in that first game? He feels very confident that he's going to be able to make the roster. And then also Baker is that. So I want to see those 3 players that if they turn out well, Patriots could have like a pretty fine developmental wide receiver room. They, moved on from JuJu Smith-Schuster. This is truly the youth movement. And so any and all of them, I just want to see if anyone can separate themselves from the rest.
Yeah, this is a chance someone to stand out because I think we better see more than one drive from each Brissett or Drake May. I'll be really cranky next podcast if that's not the case.
Bailey Zappi, 4 quarters.
We just again, now that you said that, and of course I have to. I said I'm going to hammer this point home until it doesn't happen anymore, until they both get cut. Joel Milton, the Tyquan Thornton go route. Maybe it's going to happen this week. The way that Thornton got played for like two series in the first quarter makes me think maybe they'll never see the field at the same time. But if there's ever a scenario where Milton and Tyquan Thornton are on the field at the same time, I just need the go route before one of them or both of them goes. Maybe it's going to be this time. I'm always going to look for that. But yeah, I want to see Boutte and I want to see more from Jennings, especially if the offensive line, as you said, is going to be their unit. How can he run behind some decent blockers? Maybe he can really solidify a roster spot for himself this week.
Totally. And so I have one question for you moving on to 4th down here is which player do you think has the most to gain from a good performance against the Eagles?
I'll tell you who it is. It's not a rookie guy. I think it's Jalen Reagor. Honestly, I feel like I think he saw JuJu get cut and he's kind of looking over his shoulder right now. And the amount that you and I and everybody's talking about the youth injected into this receiving core, the fact they're dumping or jettisoning the older players. Reagor's not an old guy, but he's probably on the wrong side of 25, if I had to guess. I don't know how old he is off the top of my head, but David Wallace showed a competency as a punt returner and a kick returner. They had other guys out there. He might be on the outside looking in. So if he has a chance to catch passes from Brissett or Drake May, guys that will be throwing in September and beyond, I think he's doing himself a lot of favors because, again, I don't think his roster spot is even close to safe right now.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. He was always going to be on the bubble. And I feel like when we always talked about it, it's like, okay, Kendrick Bourne may or may not be active to start the year. But Baker, Douglas, Polk, 3 definite locks. You add in Osborne, who based off of his contract is probably going to make the team as well. You have 4. They're going to carry 5. Who is going to be that 5th? Is it Rieger because he's a kick returner, or is someone else, to your point, David Wallace, going to show more ability as a kick returner with more upside that you invest in them? Or is someone like Boutte going to do better as a receiver and make that be why you take them? And obviously we were always like, Tyquan Thornton, is this West Coast offense going to be the solution for him? And who knows? But it's one where, yeah, Rieger still has a lot to prove. He started the offseason on the bubble. He's done nothing to really improve his standing on it. And so he definitely has a lot to show on this one. I think for me, I think it's more on the defensive side of the ball where I know that a lot of the players are a little bit solidified in the secondary. I feel like it's pretty good, but I know I mentioned Farms up front as being someone who has a lot to gain, very clear path with Barmore not being available. And they've brought in other players that are veterans like Tristan Hill and Mike Purcell that are just big bodies that I don't think really have a path to do it. But someone that I feel like really can help them up front that has a real path is Jimenez, O'Shane Jimenez, who got a sack in the last game against the Panthers, who has shown up very well in every single practice session, who is still young, who hasn't been able to put it together because he's been dealing with injuries, but is someone who has always had something about him. And he's contributing on special teams with Judon gone. I think that there's a real opportunity for him to make the roster as a sub rusher, especially, and this is important, is because we don't know what the deal is with Uche right now. You mentioned that the Patriots haven't really gotten too many scuffles with the Eagles at this point, but Gerard Mayo made a point of if you're a starter, we're going to make you play the entire preseason game. If you're a backup, you're not going to see the field. I believe Uche got into a little tussle, so we'll see where he stands as it comes to game time. But he's on a 1-year deal. If I'm the Patriots, I don't know. We'll see. I think O'Shane has a lot to show.
So who, if you had to guess right now, Rich, I kind of put you on the spot with your offensive line question. Who is your starting defensive front 4 right now, week 1, if you had to put the 4 guys out there, assuming they go 4-3?
Assuming they go, I would say that you have Keon White and Dietrich Wise out there. I think you have Godshaw in the middle, assuming that he's healthy and ready to go. I think they have the option. Obviously, this is going to be such a high rolling answer, but like Dietrich Wise could play inside and maybe they put Jennings on the other front. So, that's your 4-man front where you have Dietrich Wise playing the 5 technique. You have that as an option. Or, if White is a true, Wise is a true edge out there, maybe you see Ekwale out there just because he's had time in the system. But if I were to really choose and say who's our best 4, I would say you have White and Jennings on your 2 edges. You have Wise on the inside of Jennings, and then you have Godshaw smack in the middle of it.
I think it's a pretty decent defensive line, honestly. I mean, it's not as good as it would be with Barmore and Judon in there, but in terms of a quote-unquote consolation prize, I don't think there's like a gaping massive void along that front 4. I still think probably 3-4 might be their base. I think it makes a little more sense given the linebacker depth, but time will tell there. But it should be fun, man. I mean, I'm psyched. I think Jalen Hurts is a fun quarterback to watch. I think it's good to have some a little more mobility. I don't think Jack Plummer was scaring anybody. I know the Patriots were all over him. I imagine Hurts will probably be a little more of a test for the Patriots. Obviously, health is the most important thing. Everyone stays healthy. We just saw J.J. McCarthy's now gone for the season with the meniscus. It can happen to anybody at any time. So hopefully everybody comes out Friday morning completely unscathed on both Philadelphia and New England side. That's kind of all I got for this preview. Rich, anything you want to chat about before I get the predictions?
No, let's move on to predictions.
All right, let's see here. So last week you had the Patriots winning 13-9. I had them winning 27-13.
It's pretty close.
It is pretty close. So it was 17-3 the score, right?
Yep.
I think since I got the 7 and the 3 correct in both of my predictions, it's 27-13 versus 17-3. I guess I will give myself the win for that one. Yeah, that's right. Because I have the notepad, Rich, so I make the rules. That's just how it works. We're wiping the slate clean come the regular season anyway, so it doesn't really matter. The Patriots are hosting the Eagles, if I remember correctly. It is at Gillette Stadium. So I'm going to go with the Eagles to win this game. something like 16-10. Maybe I'll be very happy if it's like 3 or 6-0 Philly with the starters on the starters. And then the backups come in, and it all kind of goes to hell. But I think if they can keep the Eagles like within like 1 score with the early guys, and then maybe they get a late touchdown. But I'm gonna go Philly takes this one 16-10 to drop the Patriots to 1-1 on the preseason.
No, I'm riding Patriots on this one. I feel good about it because I firmly believe that the preseason will show that the Patriots are going to go undefeated all year long. And also, I wouldn't be surprised if the Eagles benched their starters well before the Patriots benched theirs. So I wouldn't be surprised if, after the first quarter, maybe the Eagles are up like 10-3. And then the rest of the way, I could see it being the Patriots because the Eagles will probably be playing their 4th stringers and the Patriots will probably still be on their 1st or 2nd stringers. And so I think that I have the Patriots winning this one, something along the lines of 27-13.
That's the exact score I had last week.
I know.
Me off, Rich.
And I'm going to make you have to give me the win on this one.
All right. Well, I guess I'll take it. Again, I said it earlier in the podcast. I'll say it now. I'm taking every win I can possibly get this season, preseason or otherwise. I will gladly see them go 2-0, just like the 2008 Lions, Rich, undefeated in the preseason and undefeated in the regular season. That's how it works. Should be fun though, man. I think this will be probably the game I look forward to the most. I imagine the next one, at the end of August, will be just nobodies versus nobodies and nothing to take away from it at all. But breaking down the kind of post-game analysis after this one should be a little more insightful because we'll have hopefully some non-check down game tape on Drake May to talk about, if nothing else.
No, absolutely. Looking forward to breaking it down with you. Here's to everyone just being healthy and safe this game. Fingers crossed. That's all I have. Alec, until next time, you have a good one.
You too, buddy. See ya.